Welcome to the Vaxa Bureau Intelligence Optimised podcast, where leaders across critical industries get the insights, tools, and connections they need to be ready for today and prepared for tomorrow. As you advance, your standards rise and your community narrows. That's the nature of leadership. Vaxa Bureau exists to support that journey through credible information, secure products, and a critical intelligence hub built for advancing individuals, organisations and the Indo-Pacific. Stay informed, stay operational. The signal starts now. And if you find value here, subscribe, rate the show and share it with someone building the future of critical industry. Welcome back to the Vaxa Bureau podcast. Today's episode dives deep into a quiet but significant shift that's reshaping how global powers approach the Indo-Pacific, and more specifically, how Europe is stepping up with a vision that directly intersects with Australia's strategic, commercial and defence interests. Recently, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese sat down with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. On the surface, a diplomatic conversation. But if you zoom out, it was also a convergence point in a much broader, rapidly evolving strategy. One that's unfolding 16,000 kilometres away in Brussels, Paris, Berlin and London, but with very real consequences for Cairns, Darwin, Perth and everywhere in between. Why does Europe, so physically distant, so traditionally Atlantic-focused, suddenly care about the Pacific? And what does it mean for Australian trade, defence and our critical industries? To unpack this, we're going to explore three key themes. 1. Europe's strategic shift and what's driving it. 2. Australia's pivotal role in regional stability and economic architecture. And 3. How trade, defence and critical industries are being repositioned in light of this evolving vision. Let's start with the big picture. Europe's strategic awakening. The Indo-Pacific isn't just a buzzword, it's a centre of gravity. 60% of global GDP is concentrated in this region. It contains 7 of the world's 10 largest militaries. It's home to every major strategic flashpoint. Taiwan, the South China Sea, the Korean Peninsula, the Malacca Strait. So it's no surprise that powers far outside the region, especially Europe, are now recalibrating their outlook. Resilience, in that Europe doesn't want to be held hostage to disruptions in global supply chains, maritime choke points, or diplomatic crises. And relevance, because in a world shaped by Indo-Pacific dynamics, Europe cannot afford to be absent from the table. In the past, we might have seen this attention from just France or the UK, nations with territorial and historical ties to the region. But now it's pan-European. Germany has sent frigates, the Netherlands is expecting cyber cooperation, the EU itself has issued its own Indo-Pacific strategy, wrapped in values like multilateralism, connectivity and sustainability. But make no mistake, it's also about strategic self-interest. They've realised something fundamental. If you're not active in the Indo-Pacific, you're on the receiving end of decisions made by others. So, what's Australia's role, the convergence point? Here's where we come in. Because to Europe, Australia is more than just a like-minded democracy. We're the regional integrator they need and the partner they trust. We're situated at the seamline of the Indo-Pacific. Economically, we're embedded with Asia. Culturally and politically, we lean west. And in defence terms, we're interoperable with both the US and NATO systems. When European leaders look at the Indo-Pacific, they see instability and opportunity, a region where great power competition is intensifying, where middle powers like India, Indonesia and Vietnam are asserting themselves, and where infrastructure, energy and digital connectivity will define who shapes the rules of the road. But to be effective in this region, Europe knows it needs credible partners on the ground, not just embassies and naval patrols. They need trusted delivery mechanisms, especially in smaller states across the Pacific and Southeast Asia, and Australia fits the bill. We've been in PNG and the Pacific for decades. We're leading defence and infrastructure efforts in Timor-Leste. We know the terrain, not just geographically, but politically and culturally. We understand how to partner for outcomes, not for visibility. In short, Europe has appetite, but Australia has access and agency. So, what's changing in practical terms? Let's talk trade first. Europe's concept of strategic autonomy is driving them to diversify where they source key resources. And that's playing directly into Australia's strengths. We've got the lithium, rare earths, hydrogen potential, food systems, and water capability they need. We're an alternative to overdependence on China, a hedge against volatility, and potential collaborator in future-proof industries. Now, the EU-Australia Free Trade Agreement has been rocky. We know that. But behind closed doors, there's increasing political will to find alignment. Why? Because Europe sees Australia as a cornerstone of its Indo-Pacific trade resilience. And because global instability, from the Red Sea to the Ukraine, is pushing Europe to secure reliable supply chains and fast. Don't be surprised if future trade agreements are shaped more by geostrategic imperatives than by pure economic logic. That means deals won't just be about tariffs, they'll be about standards, sustainability, shared tech, and investment in critical minerals, food security, and green transition. This opens the door for Australian industries that can demonstrate supply chain integrity, ESG compliance, and export readiness, especially in sectors like clean energy, water infrastructure, ag tech, advanced manufacturing, and defence-adjacent services. Speaking of defence, European defence interest in the Indo-Pacific is real, but it's nuanced. France, with territories like New Caledonia, Reunion, see itself as a resident power. Germany is cautiously expanding its naval deployments. The UK, post-Brexit, is rebuilding its global footprint. And the EU is now experimenting with mechanisms like coordinated maritime presences in the Indo-Pacific. What they're not doing, at least not yet, is trying to establish a NATO equivalent in Asia. Instead, they're embracing something called minilateralism, flexible coalitions of willing states focused on specific issues: cyber, maritime security, joint patrols, and disaster response. This is where Australia's defence posture is perfectly complementary. We're a core part of AUKUS, the Quad, and Five Eyes, but we're also able to work bilaterally or in agile groupings with regional partners and now increasingly European powers. There's a growing appetite for joint training, domain awareness, base access agreements, and defence industry cooperation, especially as Europe looks to export its defence capabilities and build partnerships in emerging tech, space, and AI. Australia can and should shape that engagement, not as a passive recipient of European interests, but as a curator of strategic access. And finally, let's talk about critical industries. Whether it's water security, port infrastructure, energy transition, or digital connectivity, these are no longer separate silos. They're increasingly part of national resilience architectures. Europe's Global Gateway Initiative, its answer to China's Belt and Road, is pumping billions into infrastructure, but with a governance-first lens. What Europe lacks is ground truth capability in Indo-Pacific states. That's where Australia can lead consortia, structure PPPs, and bring trusted regional relationships to the table. Think of it this way: Europe brings capital, technology, and standards. Australia brings relationships, regional credibility, and delivery frameworks. Together, we can help shape the next generation of infrastructure, services, and capabilities across the Indo-Pacific, not just for security, but for livelihoods. So where does this really leave us? It leaves us at a point of strategic convergence, a moment when Australia can step into a new leadership role, not just as a middle power reacting to the moves of others, but as a connector, a strategic integrator, a co-author of the Indo-Pacific future. The challenge now is coordination. We need our industry, defence, diplomacy, and development sectors working from the same playbook, identifying which European partnerships offer real value, where Australian strengths can be amplified, and how to engage in ways that serve both our national interest and our regional responsibility. Because make no mistake, Europe is not just testing the waters. They're wading in with strategy, money, military presence, and political will. And the countries that stand to benefit most are those ready to partner deeply, deliver consistently, and align strategically. Australia is ready. The question is, will we lead? Thanks for joining me on this episode of the VAXA Bureau Intelligence Optimised podcast. If you're working in trade, defence, mining, energy, logistics, or government, I hope this has given you a wider angle lens. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone who's shaping the Indo-Pacific story from their side of the table. That's it for this episode of the VAXA Bureau Intelligence Optimised podcast. If you found value here, subscribe, rate the show, and share it with someone building the future of critical industry. The path of leadership may be solitary, but the future of leadership is coactive intelligence. Be ready for today, be prepared for tomorrow.